The first year of 5 was the 3 smart people got away fast, and so it was Sally and I the next year after that. And that's my wife Sally, and she's very active in the business. She's my mother-in-law's visiting. You won't see her. But anyways, we started up. There was just 2 of us for a couple years, and then we grew a little bit. And then, how many years ago did we start Seed?
1994 was the first year we did one together.
Okay, so we knew Frank and Karen for a long time, and then we started doing Seed with them. The farm itself, the larger part view of it is that we are really chaotic in where we sell and what we do. In addition to having a farm stand and a restaurant here on the farm, we also do a lot of farmers markets in season. We do 9 during the week and do 5 on the weekend. We just broke down the last truck coming in this Sunday. And we go a lot to Portland, Corvallis, Newport. Do a lot of farmers markets. That's the biggest chunk of our summer income, and probably I guess the biggest chunk of our income overall. We also have a pretty large CSA, about 350 families. That is a big chunk of what we do. We do a lot of wholesale to restaurants, high-end restaurants here in the neighborhood and up in Portland, and a lot of food co-ops locally and up in Portland. And then we are members of and part owners of Organically Grown Company, which is the largest wholesale distributor of organic produce in the Northwest. And when all else fails, I ship through the company to points beyond. And then there is the seed business. And the seed business is a little bit different than everything else because everything else is sort of fresh market going out the door. And the seed business is a joint venture between Sally and I and Frank and Karen. Frank runs his own seed crew and does his own sort of thing within the boundaries of the farm. And actually we've got one of the guys that works for him now has some land, and so we're moving on to some other land too, where the seed business is. And it really, it's unique to most farming operations, I think, and it's been real synergistic where I think we're both better off for being together than we would be otherwise. So we're a certified organic farm, and you know, we can talk about cultural practices and all that stuff. We can talk about a lot of different stuff.
The fertility on the farm comes from our composting system. John, tell them about the composting.
Okay. You know, Nita wanted to drop the buses off over at the composting area, which, and in normal circumstances, and our best hopes at this time of year would be a real active place. But because we're an organic production farm, and right now it's balls to the wall, sell everything you've got as fast as you can, we haven't gotten over there to start making compost yet. But we will in a couple of weeks, and we dedicate about a 3-acre portion of land to making compost. We bring lots of materials in. My belief is that if you're going to ship a lot of nutrients off the farm, somehow or another you got to bring nutrients back in again. And so we bring in a lot of truckloads of animal manures and things like straw and leaves from the city of Corvallis. We also do we do green chop a lot of our cover crop and stuff like that, and add other materials from the farm itself back in. And we have a big compost turner. We make lots of compost.
How many miles of compost did you say you made last year? You figured out how many linear feet of compost pile you made last year. What was that?
It was probably a mile.
It was like a mile.
It was
of
a long
compost.
distance. It was long distance.
Figured out as one long windrow.
And
makes a huge pile.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, we religiously put on, our fertility program is basically compost, and then a little more compost. In addition to that, we have magnesium soil. We throw a lot of gypsum out. We spend $5,000 every year putting gypsum out there just to get more calcium, and that's particularly important for the seed business, but also for a lot of other crops.
I think generally for the health of the plants, the calcium is more important than we sometimes give it credit for. Because if you have calcium imbalances in your soil, sometimes you're not absorbing proper ratios of other mineral nutrients like magnesium and potassium, and that can give you serious disease problems. In a lot of the things we grow are fruits, and fruits, it's really important to have calcium as part of the program because the walls of the cells of fruits are made up of calcium pectate largely. So anyway, calcium is a big deal, and we have a strange situation here in our soil. All the soil in the Coast Range is high in magnesium because it's derived from the ocean floor, from the salt formed on the ocean floor. Out in the valley, most of our soil actually comes from eastern Washington and Montana, courtesy of the Great Missoula floods of 15,000 years ago or so. So right here, we're at the intersection of this coast mountain soil, which is super high in magnesium, and it causes a lot of problems related to potassium and calcium in the plants. So we are at a border right here, and we have some unusual soil issues that we've had to learn to deal with. So we add gypsum to the compost to help with that. I want to talk a little bit about how the seed business interfaces with what we're talking about with crop health and fertility. When you let plants go all the way to seed, they inevitably have to go through the flowering stage, like all the plants that we're admiring along the field here. And flowers of a lot of seed crop plants or vegetable plants actually attract beneficial insects. Some of the more familiar beneficial insects would be syrphid flies and beneficial wasps that are predatory on caterpillars and aphids and other things like that that are perennial pests for us. So part of the synergy between John's vegetable operation and my seed operation is that we have seed crops that are growing right in fields where vegetables are growing. So you'll have a vegetative field, but there's this blooming quarter acre going right through the middle of it. It might be, things in the mustard family, which attract a lot of beneficial insects. Almost all members of the mustard family attract wasps and syrphid flies and lady beetles. So that's one of the biological synergies that we have going on by integrating seed crops with the vegetable crops. Some of the other interactions are the vegetable farm gets a lot of free seed. That is, it's not free really, it's produced on the farm. Point is, we don't have to buy it, and the other point is, we grew it. And so it has gone from seed to seed in this location for generation after generation after generation, and there's just something intuitively smart about selecting your seed in the area of intended use. That's just the basic tenet of agriculture, at least it used to be. So we are actually adapting our own crops to our own farming system right here as we're producing seed, which actually goes out to all parts of the continent and to Hawaii. I heard there's someone here from Hawaii. So we have a lot of customers in Hawaii all of a sudden, right? No? Anyway, so this area right here is great for vegetable growing because we have summers that are hot enough to grow peppers and melons, and we have winters that are mild enough that we can overwinter cabbage and Brussels sprouts and all kinds of greens. With just a little bit of protection under a hoop house, we can have greens and roots all summer long, all winter long. So for season extension, these greenhouses are a really important part of what we do. But also for season extension, an important part of what we do is we're always selecting crops that can go through the winter. They're cold hardy enough, they can stand up to those diseases. And this place here is also a world-class place to grow seeds. And companies come from all over the planet to this valley right here to produce cabbage seed, onion seed, spinach, beets, Swiss chard, radish, a number of other things. But this is a real hub of the international seed trade. A lot of Chinese cabbage is grown right here. I've been told more than once that 90% of the world's hybrid cabbage seed is grown in the Willamette Valley. Now the reason for that is because our conditions are so good. Our soils are good. We're at 45 degrees latitude. The summer is not so hot that it sterilizes pollen, and the winter is not so cold that it kills off biennial plants. So it's a kind of a magic place, and we have great transportation and intellectual infrastructure at OSU. So there might be another few places, there are probably only 3 places in the world that are as good for growing seeds as this place, but they don't have those other infrastructure characteristics. So you put it all together, this just happens to be a great place to grow seed, and we grew vegetables here for a long time before we knew what a great place this was to grow seed. So we just truly, I started growing seed here before I knew I was in the best place in the world to grow seed. So that was just nothing but love. So anyway, I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought, but
Well, Frank, one of the things that Frank got into the seed business sort of back-ended because he was one of the best salad greens growers that I've ever met. He's the only person that I've ever met that could generate off of 3 hilly acres up there in Wren, where he lives, enough salad mix with a Troy-Bill rototiller, and he and his wife for labor to sustain
we paid for the farm doing
They paid
that.
for the farm. You know, when I heard he made $50,000 and he had a Troy-Bill, that's all he was. And I said, "There's something this guy's got going." You know, but his back wouldn't hold out, so then he started breeding seed. Well, he was breeding seed before his back gave out, but
Well, yeah, so
you know.
thanks for reminding me of that, John. No, but this is how, the way that I got into being a seed person was actually by growing salad greens for fancy restaurants and trying to do it year-round without using a greenhouse. And I also had all kinds of crazy sustainable ideas from, you know, from permaculture and from Masanobu Fukuoka and from the Rodale Institute, and you know, I had read a lot of books on how to grow things without tillage and without compost and without weeding, and I tried them all. But what did work for me was having a commercial production garden that cranked out high quality salad greens basically 40 months or 40 weeks out of the year without any sort of infrastructure to do it with. And the main way we did it was by matching the variety to the season. And so back in the 80s when I started my salad business, step one was looking for all the seed varieties for salad greens that we could find. And that was a really exciting time, finding all these traditional salad greens and finding things that people said nobody would eat, like arugula and cilantro, for example. When I first started growing salad greens, you couldn't buy arugula through any seed catalog that I knew of, other than the Abundant Life Seed Foundation catalog. So anyway, I made it my business while I was growing salad greens for sale to keep my own seed in the first place, because that just seemed like a good idea. But as soon as I started keeping my own seed, accidental crosses occurred. And it occurred to me that, hey, this is how you get new varieties. And I was in a business selling to restaurants, and as John knows, since he's operated more than one restaurant in his day, all restaurants want something new all the time. Every chef wants to have something new. So I made it part of the business plan to constantly be creating something new and sending it off to chefs and writing little personal notes about how we did this and what we did, and as we say these days, putting a face on the farm. And that was just a natural thing to start doing for us in the mid-'80s. And just like keeping our own seed was a natural thing to do. But as soon as you start keeping your own seed, you find accidental crosses, and you follow those accidental crosses, and you begin to realize, oh, this is what plants do when they cross different varieties, and then they segregate out new forms, and those new forms, some of them are better than what you started with. And some of them are better adapted to where I am than the parents were. And it just was like this light just coming on year after year. It's like, oh, I get it. This is how agriculture works. It was really sort of rediscovering the emergence of agriculture through a garden for me. So, by keeping my own seeds and doing my own plant breeding and using those varieties to attract more business, it occurred to me one day that if I kept doing this, after about 20 years, I could have a seed company based on an organic farm that was selling seeds for vegetables that have been bred under organic conditions. That just seemed like a good idea. And it just seemed like something that would just happen if I just kept doing what I was doing. And pretty much about time we paid off our farm, as John said, my back was killing me, and I was kind of bored with salad greens, and the farm was paid for from selling all that salad, and it was like, all right, we can get in the seed business now. We can start doing something that doesn't have to pay the bills every month. And then September 11th happened, and all the restaurants that I used to sell to closed down. September 11th, 2001, that is. They literally closed down. And there was no air traffic for a week. And a lot of those restaurants never opened up again. And that's how I knew I was in the seed business. So it was sort of like my whole career had been preparing me for the day when I just either wouldn't be able to do salad greens anymore, or something would happen and you couldn't do that. And that's how I switched over to being a full-time seed guy, but I did not have enough land to do that. And that's where John's invitation to come here and share this land here and share his resources, his equipment, his irrigation, his crew, his space, with me and Karen, allowed us to actually become seed people of some consequence. That is, we'd been selling small amounts of seed to small seed companies, and we had a really idiosyncratic seed catalog. But in order to go to the next level, I needed more land, and I needed equipment, and I needed backup, and that's what John was for me. And so that's why I know that I couldn't be what I am without Gathering Together Farm. And that's why it seemed really smart for us to form a partnership. And that's what we did. And Gathering Together, yeah, and it's been good for John, I think.
We get a lot of benefit from both, from Frank's selection and of the crops that fit on this farm, but also, we've taken over the salad mix business that Frank, quit, and we sell it more. We don't sell it to the chefs in New York City, but we do sell it all over Oregon. And a lot of times in the middle of the winter, people are just sure that this has to be our salad mix has to be coming out of tunnels, but most of the winter it does not come out of tunnels. It comes from outdoors, and it's cut from things that are growing out here in our fields. I have a core crew of that are amazing. I send them out into fields where you couldn't believe there's salad mix, and they come back with tubs of salad mix. They can find it out there, and it lives real well in our maritime Northwest. And it's due to the breeding, that we have a number of things. Gold chard comes to mind real quickly that we couldn't overwinter to
Right.
save our lives, 10 years ago, and now it reliably we can bring it off every year.
That's right.
So this is a walk by here. We're going to go through go by a lot of tunnels. We have about 3.5 acres headed towards 4 of tunnel production at this time, and we utilize them all year round. It's the high rent district. We try to keep them full. This has a crop of Roma tomatoes in here, and those yellow Romas over there are really good. And this is probably our oldest hoop house. This thing's been around for going on 23 years. Actually, second reincarnation in the same footprint. We wasted the first one in a snowstorm. But we utilize them for all kinds of crops right now. This thing, this is a crop of scallions that we plant in bunches. We plant them 5 to a bunch, pull 2 bunches to make a bunch of scallions. And this house had carrots in it, I think, before this. We got a pepper house here with jalapenos. That's a pretty spotty, rugged house. It got heavy aphids in it at one point, and I didn't want to spray it with anything that would kill the aphids because we had so many beneficials in there. So we let the war go on. I blasted off the aphids with some water a couple times, and we won in the end, but there were still some victims. Like we start planting in January. We finish off with what we got in things by the first of the year, and we start planting in January a lot of things like carrots and stuff like that, but we can't get anything outdoors. We have a silty clay loam soil that holds a lot of water, almost impossible to get a good seed bed on without wrecking the soil in the winter. So a lot of times we're in these hoops not so much because we have to be for temperature, but we have to be so we got a seed bed to plant into. But the mud on the top, we're trying to keep things warm initially, but in the middle of summer, everything that's in these things like tomatoes and eggplant stuff, it's really way too hot for them. And you can ventilate the sides, but it's still too hot. So instead of shade cloth, we're cheap farmers and we put mud on them, and it works really well.
How do you apply it?
Nancy's yogurt's a good one.
Okay. Okay.
You mix it up in gopher holes and mole holes are the best. Nice soil.
Yeah.
Put that in a bucket, water, stir it up. Nancy's yogurt container. You throw it over for a little while. You walk in, see if you got enough shade. If you got enough shade, you quit. If you don't have enough shade, throw some more on. Here, there's something that's germinating. It's 4 rows, and something is germinating a lot slower than the other 3 right here. But we'll load up most of the time for our cut mix. We're going through it one time, cutting it, turning it under, and reseeding it. But for winter, we'll be picking out of this thing, cut and come again for the winter because we're not going to reseed again. So we load it pretty hard with that. This was a carrot field until a week ago, and now there's one bed of carrots left here that we didn't take out yet. For the sow mix, we use Planet Juniors with double disc openers, which are so rare and hard to find that the Planet Junior company, which has been bought and sold a couple times, doesn't even know they made. But we've got a set and we use them and they're lovely. Put a nice narrow row down, easy to cultivate close to and to cut from. And when we go to fall planting of brassicas and stuff, we got an old Stanhay set of Stanhays that are precision seeders that can put things, small cingulate seed about every foot apart.
How many acres do you have resting every year?
Resting?
Like, yeah, like not cultivated at all.
Just about zero. We are a real intensive farm. I believe that the rotation idea and putting on a nice cover crop and letting it rest for a year would be a great idea. We've never found the ground to do that. I make up for that and think that that's okay because I add so much organic matter to this soil from our composting program that the organic matter in my soil keeps going up. The biggest problem we get from not resting the soil is the disease cycle is really hard for us to break in brassicas and stuff like that. We keep adding more ground on, and I think someday we're going to get to the point where we're going to put stuff into a pasture mix and just run it out to something else for a little while. But we haven't got there yet, and I don't know if we ever will. But it's a concept's good in my world. It doesn't work. We are a real intensive farm. Most of the stuff that most of the fields we have raise 3 crops a year, if not, usually at least 2. So.
What about mechanical cultivation? Do you have tine weeders or?
We'll walk past some of my old cultivation equipment, but
Sure.
yeah, we have a bunch of different kinds of cultivation devices, and the bottom line is most everything gets hoed. This is just sort of what the farm looks like this time of year. Stuff. That over there is a lone seed crop. I think you're going to see a Frank's. That's some parsley there going to seed. Actually, I think there was a few other seed crops out here, but they've all gone away. They were overwintering items, and Frank has harvested those already. This right here isn't weeded by design. One of my one of my favorite things this year has been selling this stuff here. Purslane. Y'all eat purslane? You know about purslane? Purslane is one of the most common weeds throughout the world. I discover as I sell this stuff at the farmers markets. We've been selling at our high-end shishi little farmers markets and to new seasons shishi grocery stores. We've been selling our weeds all summer and making really good money at it. It started because my Oaxacans will not weed this stuff out, or they hate to. I mean, they will if you absolutely force them to. But it's a great green. It's great raw. It's great cooked, and we've had. I think the reason that this is still growing right here and nobody's tilled it out is because there's a whole bunch of purslane here that will come in and harvest in a little while. Got some carrots here. This stuff, the floating row, is here because one of the things that we lost a tremendous amount of money on last year was the carrot root. Was a root fly, a rust fly, the maggot, and our carrots, and I have been battling with them to. They hate to put the floating row over the top because it ruins the tops on them, but if tops are good and the bottom's bad, it doesn't work very well. So I guess we'll get it covered. And that over there would be covered because it is a salad mix, and we use one of our strategies is to keep insects out. I mean, we have a lot of strategies for insect control, and one of them is like that, just keeping floating row cover on top of our cut mix, so the flea beetles don't take us out. This is going to go on the carrots to keep that rust fly out.
How much compost do you apply and how often do you apply it?
We pretty religiously put on 10 tons to the acre pretty much every time we till the soil, which is total overkill, I believe. But I also feel like it's our compost it doesn't have a lot of nitrogen in it, and that was really beneficial to us initially because when we came onto these soils, they were all really abused pasture land, and people had just been taking hay off them for years and not putting anything back into the soil. So the phosphorus and potassium levels in this stuff was just, in the bottom of the soil test, graph. And so we've been building it a lot, and I think we're just putting a lot of humus into the bank. And when we don't have enough compost, I think it'll ride us out. We do mix in. We've gotten a little bit more sophisticated in our compost making now, and we make this really low nitrogen, really stable kind of compost. But we also bring in chicken manure from the chicken factories over here, and we use it partially to light off the compost that we're making to get us enough into the carbon to make a good mix for the compost we do make. But we also take some of it, we just keep it straight up, and we turn it with a turner, and we do it to the minimum that you have to do to meet organic standards, and we pile it up. And if you go over there, it smells like chicken manure, and it doesn't smell like good compost. But it is our nitrogen source when we need to add more nitrogen, because one of the things we realize is that there are a lot of heavy feedy crops that are going to need more nitrogen than we're going to put on with our compost. Picking over there, we have tomatoes that we don't ideally start picking on until October. So we're going to run through till into December. They will ripen up and stay like fruity tomato. I won't say there's a definite
Worry about the gap standards keeping new farmers from getting a foothold, to tell you the truth, because if you need to be gap certified, you need a lot of stainless steel in your life, and there's nothing cheap about that. So when I was selling salad greens to restaurants, I like this. When I was selling salad greens to restaurants, we used to put those salad greens in a recycled apple box in new bags, but the apple box was insulated with recycled styrofoam noodles, and we would buy these ice gels and freeze them and strap them in the top of the box, and we would send that stuff through the U.S. mail or UPS to the best restaurants on the East Coast. And those boxes would take 48 hours to get there. And once they got there, our salad was good in their refrigerator for 2 weeks, they told us. They wanted to know if we were irradiating our salad. But we weren't. It was just clean. But you couldn't do that today. There is no restaurant that would accept such a system today. And Karen and I were selling to, restaurants that were serving the president, for God's sake. So times have really changed in 20 years, let me tell you. And I don't know how I would get started in agriculture today with, with the paranoia about food safety. And I'm not saying that it's not a tragedy when people die from eating a strawberry, but holy smokes, what we are now trying to do, fencing fields, if you find, follow gap standards, if I find deer poop in the field, we need to flag that deer poop and put a perimeter around it where nobody can touch anything within so many feet of that deer poop. You can wipe out a lot of crop putting flags like that out in your field, and it's so stupid because there are mice every square inch doing the same pooping thing. You just can't see the poop. It's crazy. It's just insane. However, it is what's going on, and everybody has to look like they're really doing everything possible to prevent anyone from getting sick from eating food, and I appreciate that. However, it's going to change, what people look like who are getting into farming, because some restaurants just aren't, and some markets are not going to allow non-GAP produce in their place anymore. OGC, Organically Grown Company, will not accept our food here if we don't fulfill the GAP process over the next 12 months, I think it is. So, and we're not yet GAP certified. We have a restaurant that, a great restaurant. We got food going out the door in all directions. We got people eating it every day. But we are not really certified as food safe. So it's really kind of strange. And I don't know. I just think this is a pretty quirky approach to public health. Yeah.
I was on a California seed industry tour earlier this week down in Salinas, and I thought they were joking when they expressed concern about birds flying over the field and pooping on vegetables. And apparently they were serious.
As a seed grower, I have now been asked by one of my customers if I, as a seed grower, am GAP certified. Is my seed GAP certified? I don't even know what that means, and I doubt that there are any standards for seeds yet. There are, of course, in sprouting seeds.